Hey guys, it's time to Nefus and chill, and as always people ask me what do raid compositions look like this patch. As a preface to this video, again as always, because still people misunderstand the point of these videos, is that I'm not telling people that X class or X composition is dog water and that you should never play it. That's not the point of the video, and that you need to play, you need to have these item sets to be successful. That's not really the point of the video. The point of the video is to show the theory crafting that goes into endgame rating in terms of endgame progression, which is mastering content or score pushing. For 99.9% of the entire ESO player base, or even the PvE community, this does not matter. However, this will offer insight into what's exactly going on in terms of score pushing meta and how that could potentially have an effect on your raid comps, or maybe it'll give you new ideas for theory crafting raid comps, and maybe give you more ideas to consider for the Flames of Ambition patch, or otherwise known as Update 29. As always, you should definitely watch the previous videos. There's a few now. I'm not really going to go into the basics of theory crafting and raid composition. Just keep that in mind, or rather these 4 points in mind while we talk about this. Slight update to the classes here, added Empower to Necromancer due to their Empowering Grasp. Other than that, everything is pretty much the same. I'm going to talk about the changes this patch and how that all ties in together with support itemization, what kind of DPS or composition you'll have, maybe the tanks or support roles could change, and most importantly, set priorities with now a kind of a dot in regards to minor brittle being an actual thing with double frost. Who does that? So yeah, there's going to be a lot of ideas here, and that's pretty much it. Alright, so first things first. The biggest question, usually, of every patch. Magicka versus Stamina, which is better? I hope I am severely wrong on this, and maybe a team out there can prove me wrong, but I don't see Stamina being a thing in terms of competitiveness. I think Stam is pretty much dead in terms of competition, in terms of score pushing, and there's a whole variety of factors as to why. And a lot of people point to trial dummy parses and be like, whoa, Stamden or Stamsorg is hitting 106k, and this macro is only hitting 90-some k plus. And again, you never should look at just the dummy parses within the context of trying to figure out a raid composition. Sure, yeah, some classes can hit high on the dummy, but are they actually practical? How will the composition overall work? Who will wear what for a stam composition? That's often the issue. So let's go over why Magicka is pretty much king for this patch and potentially for the foreseeable future. And I know there are plenty players out there, after talking around to a bunch of people from the community, that they really love Stam, but they can't find a like a Stam group, or a group that will like or let you play Stam in their mostly or otherwise purely Magicka composition. I'll try to glean light on why that is. And so Magicka versus Stam, why is Magicka better? So Stamina, this patch, definitely less cleave. It's always kind of been less, especially in boss fights, like where you're not prepped for it. But it's also really hard to organize stam comps. I mean, if you look at the sets that stam comps may need, in addition to what Magicka DPS group comps need, I mean, both comps need Elemental Catalyst, both comps need Martial Knowledge, both comps may need a form of Major Slayer, whether it's in the form of War Machine / Warring Opportunist. And for a lot of groups out there, organizing for Stamina raid composition is going to be a bit more difficult, or not difficult, but a bit more complicated if you want to squeeze out as much as you would on the mag composition. I mean, if you just look at these sets, it's like, oh, well, okay, EC can go on the macro, but on the stam composition, well, who's gonna wear the Elemental Catalyst? It could be the healer. Potentially this patch we might see a more loosening of support sets in terms of going on to the supports. But for, well, specifically for mag, but for stam, I mean, another thing people aren't talking about is penetration. Magicka DPS this patch can easily reach pen cap with Crusher provided, no Alkosh, with 7 light armor. Medium armor passives do not have inherent penetration. They have weapon damage and weapon crit. So that's another reason why stam comp is not very good. I mean, for stam comp you need Tremor Scale, Alkosh, Crusher, and potentially one Sharpen, I believe, or something like that. But in comparison to mag composition, the mag comp has a lot more options. You don't have to wear Alkosh. You don't have to wear Tremor Scale, right? So there's another reason. Organization of item sets is a huge thing, and that's why a lot of groups won't go with stam. What about score pushing groups? Well, yeah, I mean, I think last patch potentially could have seen an even field between mag and stam. And you would, a lot of people told me, hey, why wouldn't that trickle down? If stam was obviously better than mag, why wouldn't that trickle down to the rest of the game, or the rest of the people in the game? And again, organization is a bit more difficult for stam. Of course, we got the very noticeable, significant nerf to axes, or the removal of bleed damage from axes. And the fact that daggers on mag are boosting Magicka DPS quite a bit, by at least 2 to 3k, is going to be another thing you need to note in terms of this patch. And a lot of people are skeptical still of, hey, is daggers on Magicka DPS BIS? Yeah, it's pretty BIS if you can do it. Obviously, also depends on the fight. You're not going to go daggers on mag for VA as Hardman, right? Or potentially other ranged fights, like maybe last boss VK. I mean, maybe a few could do it, but not everybody. But still, there's a bunch of other changes and considerations need to be made. Like, again, off balance. So there's no more exploiter perk in terms of champion points. That's gone with champion point 1.0, and it's not really there with champion point system 2.0. So you don't have 10% more additional damage with off balance, making it both sort of a less DPS gain for either comp. But again, we also do have the fact that we can run parse food, and both mag and stam can run parse food, but mag kind of comes out on top with that, because you'll have to realize that once we start looking at things like Vamp Toggling and Ring of the Pale Order, stam is kind of weird in comparison to that, especially if you're gonna potentially slot a shield if you want to do this. And I'll talk more about Vamp Toggle, Ring of the Pale Order comps versus so-called regular comps in terms of Magicka. But yeah, that's pretty much it in regards to Magicka for stamina. I'm going to talk now just about, well, actually we could talk about hybrid composition. So I guess, like, in order to make it less hard, you could potentially add 1 or 2 Magicka DPS to the stam comp, because again, Magicka can, for the most part, have more than enough penetration to reach pen cap of 18,200 in a raid. So that's one thing people could consider, but I'm not really considering this for score pushing. So I'm just going to be focusing mostly on Magicka DPS comps this patch. So I won't really be talking about stamina anymore. So yeah, hopefully I'm wrong, or rather, hopefully the situation changes, or the circumstances changes, and stam becomes more competitive again. But yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, so we're gonna talk about DPS itemization. It's pretty much the same. We still got Medusa. Of course, MechanicalOK has made still constant presence there. We have Sororia. We have False God / Burning Spellweave, depending on the fight or trash. Zens is going to be an interesting topic once we get into it. We also do have new status effects like Hemorrhage and Overcharge specifically. Depending on the fight, you may not need Ellie Drain, but also conversely, depending on what the target is and how you focus targets, you'll still need Ellie Drain. So this is kind of a sort of icing on the cake, not really something too game changing. But yeah, that's another thing. Support itemization set has not really changed either. We can add maybe 3 to 4 more to this list. We have and I crossed out the stamp the stamp sets, and Eben. We don't really need Eben, and again, that's within the context of more added max stats to everybody, regardless of whether you're a tank, healer, DPS. And we still do have Alkosh for trash, And for certain fights, you know, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, you don't need Alkosh for single target boss fights anymore." But you can't. What I really advise everyone this patch to do when you think of raid comp for mag is don't generalize things too much and look at each fight, each boss by themselves. I'm sure that may require more gear swapping between several support players or whatever, but it's worth it. I wouldn't just be like, okay, we don't need Alkosh for the entirety of Veteran Sunspire. Because let's say for Navi, okay, sure you don't need Alkosh for Navi himself, but for Navitas's ad phases, you're gonna still need Alkosh, right? So always look at the fight by themselves this patch. That's the best advice I would say anyone can give for this patch. We still do have Yonakrin and this kind of plays into a lot of people asking me, oh, is it going to be 5 light armor for tanks this patch, or 5 medium, 5 heavy? It doesn't really matter what armor weight it is. I would still say just because of the sets that we need to optimize group damage, like Yonakrin or Powerful Assault, you're still mostly going to remain with heavy or medium. Light, I think, is kind of a gimmick. So there's that as well. And of course, we have major courage sources like Olorime, SPC. The question marks the Symphony, Hollowfang, Wormcult. Sustain is in a weird place at the moment. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but at the same time, we also have to take a look again at Ring of the Pale Order and Vamp Toggle comps. And I did upload a couple of videos just today showing what the toggle looks like in terms of like fluctuating health bars and so forth, and what we can do to mitigate that the health loss, like in the form of shields or barriers potentially. But yeah, pretty much the same monster sets. Again, new one in Kratos. This does give us 5 additional more fire damage on target, and the way this works is it does mitigate. I don't think the mitigation is that much, but it does mitigate for 12 people 5% fire damage, and also if a target is in the AoE, you don't have to be. This is a set that doesn't affect the group but affects the target. As long as their AoE is touching the target, they take 5% more fire damage. That translates to about 300 to 400 to 600 DPS per person, assuming they are running some form of fire damage in terms of infernal stabs and so forth, and fire enchants. So definitely worth it for mag comp. One thing we tested with Kinra's Wrath, in regards to maybe not off tank and the main tank can go stam DPS for certain trials or whatever, or boss fights. The disappointing thing about Kinra's Wrath is it's a cap of 6 people. So I don't really see where I could potentially fit this in without sacrificing like another like item set like PA or even MK on a tank. Again, as always, the focus is on the focus for score pushing is damage. Damage is the most important aspect. So how do you get more damage? How do you squeeze out even more damage this patch? You basically try to fit as many support sets as possible onto the support roles, whether that's 3 or 4 people, and I'll show you guys an example of what I mean. Livewire kind of still in the background. Torx pack not really there anymore. Now a lot of people are also asking me about Arcasis versus Drake's Rush. I would go with Drake's Rush for either Crash or boss fights if you can, if applicable, because not only is the proc condition easier, but also I think I would believe more consistent in terms of old gen. It did get nerfed from 12 to 4 people at most, but still I think it could definitely be a consideration for score pushing at one point in the future. Elemental Catalyst, Martial Knowledge, Zen's Redress, these are still very critical sets. We'll talk more about these as we go along. Another thing we want to talk about is Slime Crawl. Based on the reasoning or the logic, Zos said, or the Zos devs said, hey, since you can get Minor Berserk from a lot of sources like Camo Hunter or Combat Prayer, we've decided to keep the 1-piece spell crit higher than the other 1-piece spell crits you can find like Zan or Ice Heart. So that's something not a lot of people still don't know about, so definitely look into that. And again, you can find more details about traits for this patch, Wonderstone, and so forth. And of course, we're going to talk about CP, the elephant in the room. How much CP do you need to be competitive? Because I see a lot of wild theories or like people spreading misinformation that you need to get to 3600 or you need to get to 2000 CP before you think of score pushing. No, that's not true. So 1170 is kind of where you start getting both max damage. You kind of get max damage a little before that, but also mitigation. I would say once you start heading towards about 1300 CP, you should be fine for even score pushing. Once you start hitting towards 16 to 1800, that you're pretty much tapped out. The 2100 CP from this is basically everything, like all the perks that aren't really relevant, that potentially aren't relevant to you. It's just kind of the min-max point where you can have 4 slottables per tree and every perk. But that doesn't mean you can't score push before 2100 or 1800 or 1500 even. So let's just get that out of the way. All right, so let's talk about specifically some examples here. I did skip over this if you guys noticed earlier in the video. Engulfing Flames. Why did I put the formula for this? You need 3,873 spell damage plus 25,243 max Magicka to get the 10% Engulfing Flames fire debuff on target. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because, again, this has to do with the like why we're not really running Eben or potentially other sustained sets, because within the context of update 29, we got more stats. Everyone got more stats, more weapon and spell damage, more health, more max stam, more max Magicka, and of course this applies to tanks. We can now see that Dragon Knight tanks will be able to be easily run this 10%. We don't have to really spec too hard for it. I mean, we can right now reach 3,000 weapon spell damage without really trying for Alkosh. We can easily reach 3,873 spell damage plus the 25,000 some max Magicka pull in pretty much almost like every fight, right? Without sacrificing any tankiness at all, due to the nature of how CP 2.0 and also the armor changes work for heavy armor. So there really isn't risk in going for this anymore, or really any inconvenience. And that's going to play into composition, right? So instead of having a Dragon Knight, DK, or Magicka DK for Zens, you could have a Dot Crow, which should pull higher DPS than the DK with Zens. So that's certainly an option. EC, even, as we kind of kept mentioning earlier, EC could go on the main tank as well, or some support as well, instead of the Necromancer. Again, the objective here, guys, is to shift as many support sets as possible when applicable to, or when reasonable as well. You can't just always have the same sets on for every boss fight. You gotta always, again, look at every boss fight in itself, to the support roles, right? So for example, this is maybe an AA raid comp that you can do, that we've done. So like DK main tank can wear Yo PA, Yo MK. The other supports can run, one support can run double ice and take MK off. Potentially for shorter fights, we need to also mention Master Architect or War Machine. For shorter fights, we can still get the full duration of Major Slayer. We don't, and of course, something I didn't really mention, pre-buff sets, they're gone, they're dead. You name it, Sencha's Bite, Yorvolt's channeled pre-buff, Baylorg, Arcasis, everything pre-buff wise is dead, and that's an entirely different discussion. But even without pre-buffing, you can still get full Major Slayer durations depending on how short the fights are. So there's that. It doesn't always have to be Aro Yorvolds. Moving on, we do also have the ability to basically put a 9th or 10th DPS in, depending on the trial, because depending on how sweaty you want to get, you will use Vamp Toggle / Ring of the Pale Order. And how this works is you're a vampire using Simmering Frenzy that takes your health down. You cannot be healed by anyone else while you use this, right? And that's where Ring of the Pale Order comes in. You heal yourself. So where are the healers? Well, the healers are just kind of there as either a full damage spec or as a support spec, right? So you can see here that the Necro Healer can run Olo something, or MK Olo with double Ice Staff. The off-tank role could or not the off-tank role, the other healer role could definitely just be taking on more support sets or just going full damage, depending on how you itemize your composition, right? Another thing to note here is, if you guys notice, you know, we need to also consider weapon versus sets, because again, off balance is not really a thing anymore. So this kind of opens up the options of, oh, we don't really need to run lightning staff, right? We don't really need to run lightning staff as a tank for off balance anymore, right? So you can go ice staff, or bow, or resto. So this opens up a lot more options. This patch actually opens up a lot more options within the mag comp. Like you can go resto on the tank depending on the fight. You can go still bow sometimes more, or a ice staff, or maybe it depends on the fight as well, because ice staff shields only absorb projectiles. And yeah, that's pretty much it. In terms of like highest damage classes, well, before we move on, we can show another example here. Like we're still using Alkosh for trash, Defiled for trash. Depending on whether people are toggling for trash or not, probably SPC or Olo. Depending on sustain, you can still potentially do Worm, depending on the duration of the fight. So that's something to consider. But in terms of like highest damage classes, I would say, like here you can see Sorks. Sorks are pretty high on the single target tier, because I mean, even last patch I kind of covered the Sorks, I believe, in the video in regards to them getting their own major berserk, plus the fact that their single target is already high, and the fact that they're innately with the Vamp Toggle, they're getting. I mean, we're seeing parses where people with Vamp Toggle and Ring of the Pale Order have upwards of 14 to 15k spell damage. That's a lot, right? And that scales well, really well with not just Sork but other classes. I mean, I would say Sork, Magblade, depending on the trial. Like for VSO, I would go with more Magblades than Sorks. For VMAL, even I would probably go more Magblade than Sork. But for purely single target fights, or where there isn't too much trash, you can go Sork. Or for mini trials, you can go Sork. But you should also consider Magdans, and as I've been observing some Magdan gameplay recently, and I think they can definitely be competitive. Magplar and Magicka are kind of weird in the weird spot at the moment, but otherwise Macro, Maxork, Magdan, and yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of comp. And you also have to take into account, right, and Magblade of course, and you also take into account the passives. The theme is still the same in between Stam and Mag. Like for Stam, it's more about itemization being an issue, and for Mag, it sometimes is a class issue, because you notice compared to Stam, you need Minor Prophecy from the Sork, you need the Minor Sorcerer from Templar, and you still need a Dragon Knight somewhere, as opposed to Stam comps just needing the usual things like that Dragon Knight, Necromancer Wind Power, but just Minor Savagery from here. But I don't think this patch will really see any issues with this class-wise, as a lot of the classes are definitely up there in raids. Another thing I want to touch upon is Warden. Where does the Warden go besides the damage? You could potentially still have a Warden healer, but in cases where you need to probably get as much damage as possible, I'd probably put the off healer, or the role of the off healer on the Warden. And of course, we can't forget about Empowering Grasp from a Necro support. It doesn't have to be a Necro healer, but again, this is all up to you guys. This is all up to you in terms of composition and so forth. But the main takeaways from this patch is same thing. Try to offload as many support sets as possible, or when reasonable, including EC, onto the supports. Think of each fight and each trial separately rather than as a whole, and take into account Ring of the Pale Order, Toggle, and how that fits in with the rest of your itemization and comp, and that's pretty much it. It's honestly at the same time, it's a simple but also a bit of a complicated patch in terms of itemization and comp, and this could also affect strats, right? So I'm pretty excited what we can do this patch. And this patch is really weird too in itself because PTS is coming soon. For those of you who don't know, PTS is already around the corner in less than a month. So this patch is more of, okay, well, let's see if they keep these changes. I wouldn't really invest too much into this patch right now. This patch is sort of like, just grind CP and kind of just wait for the new trial. It's fun theory crafting, but given the time we have left, or like already right after the launch of Flames of Ambition, I wouldn't invest too much into it. But otherwise, I think the safest bet for anyone right now is just grinding some CP, not like 2600 or 3600 CP, but maybe up to 1800 and the XP curve at most for anyone. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions, either in the comments below or in the ESO University Discord. And that's pretty much it. Yep. Thanks for watching. Thanks for Enough Isn't Chilling. Stay safe, have fun, and see you guys next time.